Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and it's the 27th of November, 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So I think today's episode is going to be a little bit ranty, because I was going through the content that I was getting ready for today's episode, and I noticed that there is a lot to talk about on each of these kind of pieces of content. There's not that much like in terms of how much content I have to talk about, but each thing is pretty important, I think. So to kick things off, I'm going to start off with something that's got to do with MEV. So Tony here, who I've talked about a bunch on the review before, he builds the MEVboost.pix websites and other websites and just does a bunch of research on Ethereum. He tweeted this out saying P2P.org or P2P.org, which is a Ethereum staking service provider, has announced that it will call the Geth header later in the slot, trading off chain stability against more MEV profits. This is exactly the centralizing behavior that we shouldn't tolerate as long as we as users have the choice about where to stake our assets. Now, I guess there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm no expert on MEV or anything like that, and I'm no expert on what a Ethereum slot looks like, because that's what Tony's talking about here. So you'll recall that a slot in Ethereum is 12 seconds. People will refer to them as blocks, but the block portion of the slot only takes up a tiny amount of the overall slot, or a short amount of the overall slot. So yeah, it's called a slot instead of a block, those 12 seconds. Now, what P2P.org is doing here is that they're basically delaying when they're calling get header in the slot in order to maximize their MEV boost profits, because if I'm explaining this in plain English, it basically means that by delaying when they call this, they basically force people to bid up the, the amount that they're paying to extract MEV, which means they could inch out more profits out of the total slot here. Now, this leads to things like chain stability. It's a centralizing force, and it's definitely not something that we want to see playing out on the network. Now, there are multiple kind of tracks here in dealing with this sort of thing, and the technical name for this is called timing attacks or timing games, which Casper here, who does research at the Ethereum Foundation, put together a thread on, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. But I want to make clear that this is not something new. This is something that has been in research phase for quite a while now. It has been well known that can happen for quite a while now. And we've basically been relying on each of these kind of staking service providers or just validators generally, or node operators generally, to not do this, right? Because right now, as far as I know, there aren't any in-protocol mechanisms to prevent this, and there are, I think, some clients that have things implemented to prevent this, but it is an optional thing because it's not in protocol. As long as it exists at the client level, it is always optional, whereas when it's in the protocol, it's not optional. You have to follow that, and this is actually quite a difficult thing to work around, and it falls into the larger roadmap about around MEV and kind of mitigating the negative externalities of MEV. And I actually said last week I was on a panel, or a solo panel, where I was talking about a bunch of different things with Ethereum at the event that I was at in Sydney, and I basically said that something that I've said on the Refuel a bunch of times, that MEV, unchecked MEV, I should say, is really the blockchain killer, right? Unchecked MEV, no matter what blockchain it is, like pretty much every blockchain suffers from this issue unless that you have a fully private layer 1 where MEV is really hard to do, if not impossible, because you can't really do much MEV if you can't actually see what you're trying to MEV. At least that's from my understanding. But essentially, the reason why I call it the blockchain killer is because of things like this, right? We've seen the negative externalities play out around censorship and around the different builders, the block builders, and the relayers censoring certain transactions. We've seen it play out in the potential for there to be reorgs. We've seen it play out in what I'm talking about today with these timing games. Right, and there's various different ways it can play out. Now, as I said, there is a huge part of the roadmap dedicated to dealing with MEV and all that entails, but this is not unique to Ethereum in any way. I think I want to make that clear because people will talk about MEV in the context of Ethereum because of the fact that Ethereum has the most MEV to extract, because it is the most active ecosystem in terms of the value that's flowing on the Ethereum chain. Now, as I said, that this means that other ecosystems are just smaller, and if they had that same value flowing through, they would have the exact same issues, and they would have to deal with it in similar ways to the way Ethereum is attempting to deal with it. But it is not an overnight thing. It is a long roadmap. It is a hard problem to solve, because the reason why it's a hard problem to solve is because you're basically fighting against economic incentives here. or essentially the I wouldn't call them attackers, but the people doing the MEV, right, and the people benefiting from the MEV, their incentive is always to get around any roadblocks you put up to extract as much profit as they can, or as much economic value as they can from their role on the network. Now, because of this, and because that's basically your adversary there, or that's what you're competing against as a protocol researcher and a protocol engineer and a client engineer, essentially what you need to come up with is ways to make this impossible to do. And as far as we know right now, there's no way to totally eradicate MEV from the network, or totally get rid of MEV from the network. Even under like fully private transaction conditions where the entire layer 1 is like fully private, I think there are still ways to do this. I mean, as I said, like I'm not an expert on that front, and MEV in of itself is just a huge field that requires, you know, all of your attention to basically be on top of it all. But from my understanding, and from what I said before, unchecked MEV, like if you just let it go to town on your chain, will end up killing your blockchain, because essentially what happens is that it just totally centralizes the chain, all the value gets extracted out of it, and in the worst case, the chain stability becomes so bad that the chain just becomes unstable for regular users. No exchanges want to deal with the chain, no big service providers want to deal with the chain, no one wants to build on it, and you basically just have like this barren wasteland. Essentially, it'd be like a bunch of people coming through, taking everything. Like, for example, if you want to use some mythology here, it'd be like a bunch of Vikings running through a town, taking as whatever they could pillage, and then leaving, right, and leaving the town in ruins, and no one wants to be there anymore. You know, everyone lost all their stuff. No one's coming to save them, sort of thing. And that's kind of what it looks like if you leave MEV unchecked, which thankfully Ethereum is not doing, right? As I said, there is that large roadmap dedicated to dealing with MEV, but it is a very, very difficult problem. It is a very hard problem. Which has attracted some of the brightest minds to work on it, but it's kind of a cat and mouse game. It is not something that you can just solve overnight. And in terms of timing around how long this is going to take to play out in terms of getting a lot of this fixed and getting a lot of this rectified, and making it so that it doesn't lead to things like chain instability and censorship, it's years, guys. Like I would have to say, like, minimum 2 to 3 years to get the bulk of things that we want in, but then it goes far beyond that. Like, I think it's always going to be an issue until we get like a fully snarkified layer 1, which means like a fully private layer 1, which I think is definitely going to happen at some point, but it could not. It could be a thing that's 10 to 15 years out. So I think during that time, waiting for that to happen, we're really just kind of putting band-aids on the network, or essentially kind of plugging holes in the boat, so to speak, because it's very, very hard. It is very hard. Like and then another analogy I could use is, imagine that you're on a boat with someone that wants to sink the boat, and every time they put a hole in the boat, you patch it, but then they just put another hole in it, right? They find another way to put another hole in it, no matter what you do. That's kind of what it's like. And yeah, it's a very difficult problem. But anyway, that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. And as I said, you can see Tony's tweet. I'll link it in the YouTube description below, as well as Casper's tweet thread going into exactly what timing games are, why they're bad, why they lead to chain stability, and he also links to a bunch of research around this as well, which I'll link in the YouTube description below for you to check out. All right, rant number 2 is about a tweet that I came across today here, talking about client diversity on Ethereum. Now, in this screenshot, as you can see on my screen, is a list of all of the Lido node operators, all 28 of them, I believe, and what execution clients they are running. So Geth is in blue, Nethermind is orange, Besu is yellow, and Aragon is green. Now, of course, you can see that most run Geth here. But what this tweet highlighted was the fact that even the teams building other clients, like not building Geth, like Nethermind, are still running Geth as their majority client. You can see it here. It's been highlighted that Nethermind is running what it looks like 70% Geth and only 30% Nethermind. So of course, you know, people were like, why are Nethermind not just running 100% of their own client, not just for client distribution or client diversity reasons, but also just to put like their confidence behind their own client, right? And I felt a little bit bad reading through some of the comments here and some of the replies in the thread, because it felt like a pile onto the Nethermind team and to a lesser extent on some of the other core dev teams. And I felt like it was getting a little bit toxic when I was reading through the replies. And I didn't feel like it was actually fostering an environment to actually discuss why this is the case. And I have my own kind of take on this and why this is the case. So when we're talking about client diversity, or I guess like the clients that different node operators are running, you have to split this up into solo node operators, so people like me or people like you if you're running a solo staking setup there, and people like the Lido node operators that are responsible not only for any of their own assets that they're staking, but of the assets of the entire Lido network, so to speak, right? And this isn't just limited obviously to Lido, it's for every staking service provider out there. So if you've been running a client pair for a while and everything's going good, and you're trying to maximize profits as well because of the fact that as a node operator, that's your duty, to try and maximize profits in order to be competitive and in order to stay as part of the Lido node operator set, because obviously the rewards are juicy for you as well, then you're not going to just change what you're using, because it's not just as simple as a solo staker like myself, for example, changing what I'm using, and if anything goes wrong, it just affects my setup. If anything wants to go wrong, this affects like the entire Lido network, because all of the losses are socialized across the entire Lido node operator set, not just the nodes or the validators that each individual node operator is running, but everything is socialized. So if you're offline, or if something happens, and I don't know, in the worst case scenario, you get slashed or anything like that, right? Or you leak your validator keys out, anything got to do with it, it gets socialized. So it is definitely not something that you want to do lightly. And on top of that, each of these node operators has their own pipeline, their own kind of DevOps pipeline here for how they do staking as part of Lido, and just how they are as a node operator here. So if you've got something that's running well, and even though you know that it's not the optimal case because you want to definitely to contribute to client diversity, you're not going to rock the boat too much, and you're not in a rush to rock the boat. And that's the first thing. The second thing is the fact that up until recently, I would say that Geth is still the best client, right, to run. It is still the most reliable, and obviously it being a supermajority is not good for the network, because if there was a bug in Geth, then we would potentially finalize on a bugged chain. But when you're a core dev team like Nethermind, for example, they know all the limitations of their client, right? They know that they probably know that their client is not as, I guess, performant as Geth. Or maybe even the Basil Aragon team is in the same boat there. So because of that, they also don't want to change, because, I mean, when you see how the sausage is made, you become bearish on the sausage, right? It doesn't matter if it's an amazing sausage to everyone else, you're still the one seeing how it's made. You know everything that could go wrong with it. You know all the kind of like under the hood stuff, right? So when you do know that, it becomes a bit difficult to change there. Now, I do believe that Nethermind as a client is up to scratch with Geth at this point in time, but it historically hasn't been, and Nethermind has been a Lido node operator for quite a while now. So those are the two main things I just wanted to cover there. But also, as I said, I don't think we should be shaming any of these teams. We shouldn't be shaming core developers into running other clients here, or basically saying to them, hey, why aren't you running your other client? Are you not confident in your client? Because there are so many other reasons why they would be doing this, as I just outlined as well there. And on top of this, when it comes to client diversity, Lido is actually not too bad, right? It is not great. I mean, you can see how much Geth is here. But if you want to talk about percentage share of the network versus Geth dominance, you can look at, if we go to Rated.network, we can actually look at the percentage share of the network and see which is most dominant here. You've got Coinbase. Now, Rated.network will only show you the consensus client distribution here. Coinbase is doing okay. I mean, not the best. They've got like 50% Prism, 38% Lighthouse, and 11% Teku, which is fine. You know, it's generally okay. And there's no I guess like there's no confirmation on this, but I am assuming here, I'm making a big assumption, but I think it's an educated assumption based on what I know. I think Coinbase is running 100% Geth, and they have 50% of the network. So their entire node operators, all their validators are running off of Geth, right? Whereas with Lido, it's more varied, as you can see in this screenshot here. It's still heavy Geth, but it's more varied. So if you really want to shame someone or encourage a provider to change to something other than Geth, you really should be telling Coinbase this. You really be reaching out to Coinbase and saying to them, hey, you know, you're running majority Geth, like, or we're assuming that you're running all Geth. You should change, right? You should change to Nethermind. You should change to some of these other clients there. And it's not just Coinbase. Maybe even Binance is running all Geth and Kraken and other providers out there. And same with Lido. Obviously, you should be telling these other node operators that, hey, you should change to other clients as well. But it shouldn't be something where you shame them. It shouldn't be something where you make them feel kind of like backed into a corner. You make them feel bad. We should really just foster a more healthy environment when it comes to this sorts of stuff. So that was my kind of main issue when reading through some of the replies here. I don't like it when we shame people. That's not what the Ethereum ecosystem and Ethereum community is to me there. But hopefully that kind of explains that for you and kind of my general view on that there. So that's rant number 2 done. Now, taking a pause from the rants here, just to highlight a tweet from Proto Lambda today, where he said, wasted a lot of time researching wallets, they're all bad. So obviously starting the tweet off a little bit funny there, but essentially this is a great tweet. It's not a tweet thread, it's just one tweet going over not all of the wallets that exist in Ethereum today, but a lot of the wallets that exist in Ethereum today and Proto's experience with them, as well as a very, very long and comprehensive wish list of features that he wants in wallets. Now, he does make the kind of distinction here that the wallet that he wants and the features that he wants is probably not going to be what the majority wants, right? The normies, the people who don't care about all these extra features, they just want to kind of like swap a token on Uniswap or something like that. They're not going to care about all of this. But this still is a really, really great tweet that you should probably definitely bookmark that basically goes over the wish list of what maybe the advanced users would want in a wallet and the different wallets out there that are available to you. And I think from my read, Proto was the biggest fan of Rabby. So Rabby, he tested here, Rabby Desktop, and he was the biggest fan of that. And I've tested it out as well. And honestly, I'm a pretty big fan of Rabby too. I think it's a great wallet there. But different wallets have different purposes, right? I've always said that MetaMask is like that all reliable where you know it's going to do what it's going to do, but it hasn't got all the fancy bells and whistles. It also is lacking in certain security features and pop-ups and warnings and stuff like that. And then there are a bunch of wallets like that, basically. And then there is the kind of more recent wallets that have come out that you may not trust as much because they haven't been around for very long, but they do have all those extra features. They have those warnings, those bells and whistles, something like Rabby, right, for example. But I just figured it was worth highlighting this tweet because it's really great and the wish list is very comprehensive and you can actually see what it looks like for an advanced user. Like all of this sorts of stuff is definitely advanced user stuff because Proto is I mean, he was an Ethereum core developer and now he's a core developer at Optimism. So he definitely is an advanced user of Ethereum here, but still, I think it's definitely something that you should give a read to. So I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to check out. All right, on to the last rant of today's episode, and this will round out today's episode. It's basically all about Layer 2. So I came across this really great tweet from Jesse Eckel, which basically echoes a lot of what I've been saying over the past few years, both on the Refuel, on my newsletter, on Twitter. But he starts off the tweet by saying, there's a lot of criticism going around regarding Ethereum having too many Layer 2s. This criticism misses the entire point of Layer 2s. The argument for a Layer 2 scaling strategy is an argument for the free market's ability to solve problems efficiently. It's Ethereum's App Store moment where innovators and entrepreneurs each get to build their vision for Ethereum's future and let the market decide. And then he lists out a bunch of different L2s and what their vision looks like. And this is bang on, guys. Like, I probably couldn't have said this better myself, to be honest. This is exactly what Ethereum's roll-up-centric or L2-centric roadmap is all about. We pushed out all of the scaling innovation, and it's not just scaling, right? It goes beyond scaling. It's like privacy innovation, innovating with different virtual machines and different programming languages. But we pushed all of that out to the free market. Because essentially what had been happening for years prior to that is that it was pushed out to other layer 1s. Obviously, because Ethereum layer 1 is slow to move, hard to change, we had this kind of massive amount of layer 1s that would just get spun up, and they had all these other bells and whistles, and everyone was like, this is going to kill Ethereum, blah, 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 whatever. So really, it was just like, okay, well, if this is going to be the case, if this is what the free market does, let's just bring that home to Ethereum. Let's just do it so that layer 1 is the settlement layer and layer 2s become the new alternative layer 1s, where essentially you can experiment to your heart's content and you still get to inherit the good properties of Ethereum, right? In a properly constructed rollup, you still get to inherit the security, the decentralization, you still get to have a best-in-class bridge, all that good stuff there, and you also get to have the easier bridging for users to the L2s, and then Ethereum as an ecosystem ultimately benefits from this, and no one's calling a layer 2 an Ethereum killer, which is also great from a social layer perspective. But it really is about that free market. It's about that bizarre model, where essentially everyone gets to compete fairly. as a layer 2, everyone gets access to the same Ethereum layer 1 block space. Like, no one is kind of favored, right? Because it's a permissionless platform, and we get to bring all of that innovation to Ethereum without having to, I guess, put up with the fact that layer 1 moves very, very slowly. Because if you remember, the last hard fork was in April for layer 1 Ethereum, and that was only to enable big in-chain withdrawals, really. We pushed everything else out. And the next hard fork is looking like March, so almost a year after the previous one, obviously to bring a big upgrade to the network in EIP 4844, but that is way too slow to move if you want to innovate on things like scaling, things like privacy, things like other virtual machines. Whereas at layer 2s, they can move as fast as they want. Yes, of course, they're more centralized, but so were all these other L1s out there, right? They were centralized, they were easily upgradable, but that's the whole point. When you're trying to move fast and innovate and basically compete as part of a free market, you need to be able to do that. Whereas Ethereum is not competing on that front anymore. Ethereum layer 1 is basically competing to be the best settlement layer in the world, which I think it is right now, the best settlement layer in the world, or I guess like settlement layer for blockchains right now. And it continues getting better over time, and it's being optimized for that. But when it comes to scaling and privacy and the other things, layer 2s are where it's at. And as Jesse highlighted here, each layer 2 has their own vision. Optimism has the superchain vision, Arbitrum has their universe of chains vision with a focus on app-specific chains. Polygon has a vision of unified liquidity using their ZK tech, similar superchain to Optimism. Eclipse is doing, Solana's SVM as a layer 2, right? Blast L2, he says, yeah, it's mostly like a cash grab, and it doesn't have anything to do with L2s. I'm actually going to rant about Blast L2 in a second. But yeah, I just thought that was a great tweet highlighting exactly what Ethereum's L2 or rollup-centric roadmap is and why we went down that path there. Now, I do have some L2 stats that I wanted to go over that I'm going to say for the end of the episode. I did want to quickly segue into the last rant of today's episode, which was about the Blast L2. Now, I say Blast L2 like it actually means anything. It doesn't. I tweeted out today, if it's not obvious by now, Blast currently has nothing to do with L2s. People deposited funds to farm an airdrop, that's it. Anyone can set up a multi-sig, promise an airdrop, and then say there will be a product later, such as an L2, a DeFi app, a social app, or whatever else it is. And we've seen this in other areas too. I mean, as much as I love Eigenlayer, right now, it's literally just a contract that you deposit funds into. They're doing that strategically on purpose in order to bootstrap the network, right? Because they need to bootstrap the amount of ETH that's restaked with them in order to bootstrap their products. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing. The vast majority of people are depositing into there because they expect there to be an airdrop. I mean, Eigenlayer hasn't said anything about an airdrop, as far as I know, but they expect there to be one. Whereas with Blast, they just basically took it to the logical conclusion of, okay, let's just tell people that there's going to be an airdrop. Let's just market it as like there's going to be an L2 because that's like the buzzword of the day. And then people deposited whatever it is. I think it's almost $500 million now into the contract, which is just a multi-sig contract. It's got nothing to do with an L2. There is no bridge, there is no L2, there is no usable thing. The funds are locked, and it's just like any other multi-sig. Like, I could set up a multi-sig right now, right? I could set up a 4 or 5 multi-sig, 3 or 5, whatever it is. I could make myself all the signers for it, or I could get other people to do it with me. I could say to people, hey, deposit funds into this, and there'll be a token at some point in the future, and there'll be like a DeFi app that I'm building on top of it. And, you know, maybe given that I have a bit of a reach in the ecosystem, I could probably get some funds into it, right? I would never do this, of course, obviously. Like, I can't think of anything more grifty, to be honest, to do something like this. But I wouldn't do this, but I could. And anyone can do this. It's a permissionless platform. No one can be stopped from doing this. But it's got nothing to do with L2s, right? It's got nothing to do with a DeFi app. It's got nothing to do with a social app. All it's got to do with is people farming an airdrop. That's literally it. People are just trying to make money. And this applies to literally everything. So that, I mean, this isn't going to be a long rant. It's like just a mini rant there to continue on what I said Saturday about Blast, and it really irks me that people are making this mistake here, because I even had someone reply to my tweet and said, you know, this is true, but that being said, the L2 roadmap sets this up to happen again and again and again. But again, that's got nothing to do with the L2 roadmap. It's got nothing to do with L2s. I replied and I said, you missed the point of my tweet. This has nothing to do with L2s. Anyone can set up a multi-sig and market the fact that there will be any product later with a token attached and people will farm it. This is just the consequence of a permissionless platform. So yeah, that was the whole point of this tweet, to basically say to people that L2 or not, this is just people farming an airdrop. They don't care if it's an L2. All they want is the token. And when Blast comes out and says that there's going to be a token, right, and they have all this marketing around that, and they're very aggressive with it, not only with the marketing, but with their investors, obviously backed by Paradigm, right, and all of the influencers on Twitter are shilling it, and the referral links and stuff like that, right? Of course, people are going to deposit funds into this because they're trying to make money. I liken it to people just buying a coin. Like if someone's shilling a coin, or if a coin's going up, people are buying it. It's just very hard to see how much money is actually flowing into that coin. You can see it going up, but you can't quantify the amount of money going into that coin. There's plenty of coins out there where people buy, $500 million worth over time because it's going up, or because they think it's going to go up, or something or other. But we don't look at that because it's very hard to track that. Whereas with a multi-sig, you can just see how much money went into that multi-sig. And as I said, it's locked as well. So it's just sitting there. It's not technically just sitting there, the ETH. It's being staked, but I mean, it's just sitting there as staked ETH, as ST ETH. And then eventually the people who deposited, they're expecting to get an airdrop out of it. So yeah, anyway, I'm going to end the rant there because I wanted to go over some of the actual L2 stats that I've been looking at lately. But moving on, so L2Beat and Growthepie.xyz are my two favorite websites to keep track of what's happening in the L2 space. You guys know L2Beat very well by now. I've talked about it for a very long time now. But essentially, we're at all-time highs in terms of TVL. TVL is not my favorite metric for a number of different reasons, not just for L2s, but like for literally anything in crypto. But if you look at kind of what it looks like right now, we've been up only for quite a while. I mean, since the start of the year, basically, and TVL is obviously affected a lot by the asset prices, and obviously as asset prices go up, the TVL will go up. But it also shows that people aren't really withdrawing either, and people are depositing, and deposits are accelerating here for different L2s out there. So that's the TVL. Then you can go to activity, which is actually a more accurate measure. Not the best still. I don't think TPS is like the best measure out there, but it's better than TVL, I think. And you can see that TPS-wise, it's actually been pretty standard, and at about like what 50-ish TPS for quite a while now across all of the L2s that L2Beat tracks. But then it's been spiking recently, and there's been more kind of activity happening here. And as I mentioned before, not all TPS is created equal across different L2s. And what L2Beat tries to do is try to normalize this and basically try to make it so that it's equal, but it's not an exact science. But still, it's cool to see that both TVL, activity, and a bunch of other metrics are trending up still for L2s. Even though, I mean, the market's heating up, but as I said, we're in that transition period between a crab and a bull market. It's definitely not a full-blown bull market or anything like that yet, but it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like when the market does heat up a lot from here. Now that's L2Beat and what they have. Now we can go to Growthepie.xyz and see a bunch of different metrics. So they have way more metrics than L2Beat has, which you can go check out. I'll link in the YouTube description below. But in terms of the layer 2 user base, which is basically just tracking the number of addresses, not actual users, because we don't know, obviously, one user can have multiple addresses. You can see that that's at all-time high right now. And it's been at all-time high for a couple of weeks now, maybe 2-3 weeks now. And you can see users per chain, so you can see what chain these users are on. Right now, Arbitrum and ZK Sync Error are leading. And then you can go to kind of like a percentage breakdown as well of this. So this is just the basic kind of addresses, active addresses on these different kind of chains here. And there's other metrics out of here as well, such as on the left here, transaction count, which I believe is also probably at or kind of like approaching all-time highs. And then you can go to one of my favorite one, which is the fees paid to layer 1 by the different layer 2s out there. I love monitoring this because you can actually see what these layer 2s are actually paying to use Ethereum, and obviously most of this is burnt because of the EIP 1559 mechanism. It's not at all-time highs yet. It was much higher during, I guess, like May of this year, and this will also change dramatically post EIP 4844 because of the fact that essentially layer 2s get a fee market that's reset to 1 Gwei. Essentially, it's not going to be at the 33 Gwei that we see right now because layer 2s will no longer be sharing the fee market with the rest of the network there. But still, that's pretty cool to see. And then you can see like fees paid by users, transaction costs, different analytics of block space. There's so much here, guys. I mean, I'll link this in the YouTube description for you guys to check out. But really, the TLDR of all of that is that layer 2s continue to grow, they continue to thrive, and their future looks very, very bright. And yeah, I can't wait to see what this looks like both post 4844 because fees are obviously going to be a lot cheaper, more users and will come to the chains. There'll be more apps built on those chains to attract those users. And then as the market generally heats up, obviously more and more people are going to onboard here and the network effect just continues to grow. But I think on that positive note, after ranting for most of today's episode about various things, that's going to be it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.